Typos. Okay, that's really nice. I get emails all the time from people who've gone through websites and they're telling, is that you? Do you? No, okay, love it. What, did you have any over here?
I'm supposedly very good at making gravy.
We'd work really well together. What type of gravy do you do? Yeah, like, are you going for a meat gravy? What? Yeah, okay. Like, have you got a particular meat gravy you're going for? Chicken, strong. Thank you so much. At the back, what's it? Tech support. That is really useful. And we're just saying this in Samsung space. So, Samsung space, very good at tech support. That might be really useful. That's fantastic. Jemima, what's yours?
I'm very good at making quite a mess in my house.
Yeah, that is really good. That's a wonderful thing. Carolina, what have you got? What have you got? Come on. Can't back out now.
I said that I was good at everything, but obviously I don't.
Oh, okay. You're good at being modest. That's it.
Yeah, because I couldn't think of one.
Okay, just lots of them. At being nice. Obviously, superpower of being compliments over here. So being very generous. Lovely. Thank you. Did we have any at the back? What did we have? Bossing around. Okay, that is a good thing. That is good. That's like bossing around people. That is a useful thing to have. Did you have one as well?
I couldn't think of one. I mean, I wear a different pair of earrings every single day.
That's a mundane superpower. That's really great, right? That's fantastic. That's and last group, what did we have here? Did you have one?
So basically, it's not very mundane, but I'm very good at eating lots of food at once. Different types, as long as it's not like something silly like fish and chocolate. I wouldn't do that, but
Okay.
any other foods that go together, it's like,
Is any of it past its sell-by date?
unfortunately,
No, it's not past it at all. Okay, fabulous. Did you have one as well?
Very good at like faffing about. Like before I leave the house, like I just faff.
Faffing. That's a great thing as well, you know? We need to fill our time with something wonderful. So, faffing about. And that's really what I've just been doing, isn't it, for the last... Thank you so much, all of you, for giving that. I feel, is that enough? There's a nice of exchange for you. Okay, that's great. And then I can hand that back to Jemima. Welcome, everybody, to this evening's Lifting the Lid, Living with Cancer. As I said, my name's Toby. I had Hodgkin's lymphoma when I was 19 and 21, and I'm one of the young ambassadors. And we're gonna, you've heard quite a lot of my mundane superpowers, but we're gonna do an introduction first. We're gonna go down the road. We're gonna hear their mundane superpowers. I know you've been desperately waiting for it. So we're going to hear their mundane superpowers and then hear about their cancer diagnosis. And then we're going to go all the way down, Jake. You'll be last, just so you know. Thanks, Jake. And then we'll hand over to Jemima afterwards to hear from Trekstock as well. So, I mean, I've done quite a few. So can I hand over? Is that all right? So your mundane superpower, please.
Okay, so my mundane superpower is I will always take my makeup off at the night, regardless how drunk I am or how tired I am. I have to take my makeup off. Can't leave it. There we go.
That is very impressive, right? So thank you.
Pleasure.
And will you share your cancer diagnosis as well for us, please?
Absolutely. So I'm Laura. I'm 34, and I was diagnosed back in 2014 with breast cancer. I found a little lump while I was actually away in Australia on holiday. Didn't know at 25 that I even needed to check my breasts, wasn't looking, and just came about it by chance. I was in the shower one morning and went to the doctors, thought it was maybe like a hormonal lump or a cyst or something, but instead I got told it was grade 3, stage 3 breast cancer. I went through, I say the full works because that's what my oncologist said to me, literally throwing everything at it. So chemotherapy, mastectomy, radiotherapy, hormone treatment, another combination of drugs because I was estrogen positive and HER2 positive. And after about a year, I finally finished my treatment and I tried to get back on with work and life. Prior to my diagnosis, I was actually a hairdresser. I was really busy. I was a 25-year-old sort of running around doing what 25-year-olds do, drinking lots, eating lots, and just having a great time, taking my makeup off every night. So I tried to get back to that, but as we all probably know, it's quite difficult after a diagnosis to kind of find your normal again. And I sort of felt very challenged trying to find a new version of me. But about a year later, I developed a pain in my right shoulder, and this pain I put down as a gym injury. Now, I was very naive again to the fact that anything could come back that quickly or things could change that fast. So I convinced everybody, my doctor, my husband, everybody, that it was a gym injury. And it wasn't until 6 months later where finally I decided to get it looked at, because I thought maybe it needed some surgical intervention, that it was discovered that it was actually a tumour all over my humerus head. And the breast cancer had spread now to my bones. So it was now in my humerus, my spine, and my pelvis. I went through then an extensive operation to remove my humerus bone. So I have a completely metal shoulder and arm. And I then went on to more chemotherapy, lost my hair for a second time. And then I started a drug for the type of cancer I have, which is called dual HER2 therapy. And I have that every 3 weeks in hospital. And 5 years, well, over 5 years, or nearly 6 years actually, I'm still on that drug line, which is incredible, because I was told it might only work for 18 months. And I know everybody has very different sort of reactions to medication. But obviously, I am just overwhelmed that I am still here, still doing pretty well. I mean, I don't know what my future holds. I think we all live by sort of 3 month scans. But yeah, I'm really pleased to be up here talking to you all today.
Thank you. Lovely. And passing on to Nat. Nat, we're going to start, though, first, human first. Can you, they're all waiting for it, okay?
So disappointed.
Your mundane superpower, please.
So I'm really good at remembering people's zodiac signs.
Ooh, what's yours?
Cancer, ironic.
Okay, there you go.
That's very easy to remember.
Yeah. And yeah, could you tell us a little bit about your diagnosis?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed at the age of 36 with advanced cancer in my bowel. So it was basically caught really late. So it was filling my pelvis, growing into my spine. It had crushed my vaginal canal, so it was inoperable. So I started chemo and radiation at the same time for 29 days, pelvic radiation with a chemo pump attached, which was intense, in the hope that it would shrink the tumours away from the spine, basically, so they could operate. And I responded really, really well, actually, to the treatment. Had a bit more chemo. You have to wait with radiation to give it time to, for the tumour to die off. And then, sadly, by the next scan, it had aggressively started growing back as soon as I was off treatment. So then the pandemic hit, and I was referred for a surgery called a pelvic exenteration. Had to have chemo first, though, because there were no ICU beds, so they couldn't do my operation. So I had to have some holding chemo. Lost my hair, which is unusual for bowel cancer patients. And then in August 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, on my own, it was a 12-hour operation where they removed, it's such a long list. I'm so used to saying it now. So they removed my ovaries, fallopian tubes, uterus, cervix, vagina, rectum, anus, the bottom of my spine. I'm missing some bits. A muscle, the inside of my pelvic bone, the bone from the left side. And the cancer had also spread to my left ureter, so the tube that connects your kidney to your bladder. I wanted to keep my bladder so that I only had one bag rather than two. So my surgeon was really kind, and he got an extra surgeon involved to cut the cancer from my ureter and then reimplant it into my bladder. So yeah, massive operation. I had to learn to walk again. I have a colostomy forever. And there was kind of extensive damage to my bladder, so I have to self-catheterize now. I'm really lucky I'm mobile. I shouldn't really have the use of my left foot, but I have, so that's really amazing. And yeah, it's been completely life-changing, and really a tough journey to sort of, I don't know, find myself again. When you get cancer and you have this idea of where your life is going to go, and then all of a sudden everything changes, and the things you thought you were going to do with your life, you no longer can, and you have to manage your expectations and just readjust. But yeah, I don't think anyone would know that had happened to me if I walked past them on the street, and I'm actually probably loving my life more now than I did before I got cancer, which is cheesy but true.
Thank you. And we're going to go to the man on the screen next. Jake, over to you, please. Your mundane superpower first, Jake, if that's okay.
Oh boy, sorry, I'm just getting used to being the giant head on the screen. Luckily, though, it's quite high contrast on the stream, so I can make out the sort of shape of my beard, and that's about it. So I'm quite comfortable with that. But my mundane superpower, I'm quite good at finding things. Like,
Ooh.
I can kind of like visualize where I last put them, but the opposite to that is I'm really good at losing things.
Okay, yeah.
And I am constantly having to find those things that I am always losing. So like, I will find it eventually. I know I'll find it eventually, but I do find it. So
Yeah.
that's
And Jake,
it's useful, but also bad.
What's the thing that has been your proudest thing that you've found? You know, so like everybody's annoyed, you can't find this one thing. What's the thing that you're like, oh my word, I found this thing?
I don't know. There's one thing that I was trying to find the other day that I still haven't found. That when I do find it, it will be really good. I was going back to Newcastle to go to the Newcastle match at the weekend, and I turned the house upside down trying to find a very specific Newcastle top, and I haven't found it yet, but it will turn up eventually, and I will be very, very happy with myself when it does.
Yeah. Thanks, Jake. And could you tell us a little bit about your diagnosis as well, please?
Yeah, so in March 2020, right at the start of the pandemic, I was diagnosed with osteosarcoma, which is a primary bone cancer that gets about 150 people in the UK every year, most of which are under 30. And the lead up to that, though, was I got a blood clot in my arm doing a half marathon, and no one could figure out what it was. And then in a scan for that, they found a big old tumor in my femur that, after a load of imaging, wasn't diagnosed. But by all accounts, the imaging wasn't saying it was bad. So it was quite rare that it went malignant very quickly. So a couple of months after I had the blood clot, my femur snapped in half with no real blunt force or anything. I was just messing about in the pub, and thankfully I'd already had like 10 pints at this point, because I think that was the worst pain I've ever been through. So I can only imagine what it'd been like if I was like fully switched on at that point. But because the tumor hadn't been diagnosed up until that point, after I'd spent 12 days in a traction splint, the sort of general orthopedic surgeons, when they put my leg back together, they spread the tumor into my pelvis and into all the muscles around my leg. So I was kind of learning how to get about again on crutches with the big broken leg. And then I got called back in. And then it was the day after the first lockdown was announced. They started explaining the treatment to me. So the treatment was, when they started explaining it to me, was the sort of front load, maybe 3-4 months of quite heavy chemo where I would be an inpatient the entire time. And then there would be a surgery, and then there would be some more chemo after. But everyone on this panel will know they sort of spoon feed you more information about the treatment as time goes on. So, and I realized about 20 seconds before they told me what the surgery was going to be, I realized what it was going to be. And it was chemo, surgery, and the surgery was to amputate all of my right leg and half of my pelvis. So I have half an arse. So if you see me like fidgeting around like this on the screen, it's just because I tend to sit with my leg up here to sort of balance myself, and I just constantly have to make myself feel a bit comfy, because I just have like what I always refer to as like my nubbin, or like a meat cushion.
Yeah.
That's made of like the muscle from the inside of my leg. So I had a tattoo of a whale on the sort of bottom of that leg, just above my knee on that leg. So, and I have half of that whale, and it's upside down on my back. So after that quite heavy surgery, I then ended up with like having probably 7-8 months of quite heavy inpatient chemo after that, where I was pretty much in the hospital full time, and like it's just quite rough. I think I had a kidney failure at one point. My bone marrow just stopped working at one point, and then so I think all in all, it's probably like 9-10 months of heavy inpatient chemo, and then a few more months of lighter once a week chemo where I didn't have to live in the hospital. So it was probably like it was about a year all in from start to finish of treatment. And here I am.
Thank you so much, Jake. Thank you. And thank you, all three of you, for starting us off there. Should note, just before I hand over to Jemima, we've got two members of the panel who aren't here at the moment. Unfortunately, Sukhy isn't able to join us today, so won't be joining the panel. And Dr. Cate will be with us. Nurse Cate will be coming, yes, fairly soon. But I'm going to hand over to Jemima first, just to introduce Trekstock a little bit. For those of you who don't know Trekstock, I expect a lot of you do. You might know Jemima.
Hello, everybody. My name's Jemima, and head of programs at Trekstock. And thank you for coming this evening to our Lifting the Lid on living with cancer. We're all about, as Toby said, human first, cancer second. We're all about helping you to find your new normal, to be able to not be defined by your cancer, and to be able to connect and get equipped with information and the tools to be able to live the life you can in the best way possible. So that's why we invited these amazing people to come on the panel to join us, and for Toby to host, having lived it himself. So I just want to welcome you. If it's your first event, we know it can be a bit nerve-wracking to come along, but everyone will make you feel welcome. Stay with us afterwards. We're going for a drink downstairs in a nice bar in Cold Drops Yard. And we know how important it is to meet others who get it, and that's what we're all about. So I hope you enjoy this evening.
Thanks, Jemima. Just noting that you said 3 amazing panelists and Toby. So that's really lovely. But we're going to start, and I think Jemima's made a really good point of we're here to talk about living with cancer. And I want to start, Nat, by talking about life just before diagnosis. And so I want to talk about what you were doing in your life, what was living without cancer for you.
Yeah, so I trained as a dancer, so I was always really active, then got an injury, so I went into primary school teaching, and then did a bit of dance teaching as well. So that was my life directly before, so full on, lots of energy, very active. It just stopped me in my tracks, really.
Yeah. You had quite a big career change. You said you had the injury, and that must have... And you did say it was quite a big injury. What was the injury for?
So I tore my cruciate ligament. So it was a big one. But I guess, that was the first time I had to sort of rethink, the things that I wanted to do with my life, obviously prior to cancer even coming on the scene. And I think that happens often in life, doesn't it? Things happen and we have to regroup and go down, I always follow my heart anyway. That's what leads me. But just follow the things that give you happiness. So I'd already had to do that once before cancer.
Yes. Yeah. And Laura, what about you? What was life before cancer? What were you doing in your world? You've mentioned the hairdresser.
Yeah, so I was a hairdresser. I trained in hairdressing since 2005 when I was 17, and it was just I loved the career, but I actually, after about 5 years, took a bit of a break and went and worked on super yachts for 2 years, which was incredible. But then, so life, it was amazing.
That was a twist.
Yeah, that was a twist. Yeah, I went and worked on super yachts. I mean, I basically travelled lots of Europe with rich people paying me, which is great. But then I came back and I really wanted to set up my own business. I'd actually just met my now husband about 2 months before I went and worked on super yachts. We sort of did a long distance thing. But then I sort of moved back and moved in with him. But then a few months after I moved home, my mum got really poorly. She actually came down with a neurological illness. So it was then juggling I started up my own business. I'd just moved back from this amazing career, back into hairdressing, and then trying to juggle my mum because she had to deal with carers, and we had lots of, house move for her and other things. So it was quite chaotic. I've got 3 sisters, so it was sort of juggling. Again, I think when you've got siblings, it's not always the easiest thing to actually juggle, say, care for maybe a parent, because you're having to everyone's got different opinions. And so that was really stressful. And I actually feel, no one knows what caused my cancer, but I know from a fact that I was in a very stressed period beforehand because I had all this going on. And then me and the other half decided we wanted to go on a bit of a once-in-a-lifetime trip. So we went off to Australia, and I left where I was working in a salon just before we went, and then I started a new salon as I came back. But then, obviously, while I was in Australia, I found the lump. So, life was busy. I was a 25-year-old, had lots going on personally, but also just loving my career, loving life. I did wedding hairdressing as well, which was obviously a big thing. So, yeah, just really enjoying everything going on, but then with this underlying stress of dealing with my mum's illness. So,
yes. Yeah. And Jake, I've heard a little bit about your story before. So could you tell everybody, a little bit about what you were doing before your diagnosis as well?
So I moved around a lot from finishing college, went to uni. So I work as an architect. It's just over 2 years since my amputation now. So I was working full time as an architect. I've always been fit and healthy and strong. So I was a beach lifeguard for 8 years. I've gone all over the place. So I was just working in Glasgow, going to the gym a lot, running around a lot. And I'd been a competitive swimmer and a triathlete, and so I quit competitive swimming when I was a teenager, and then I just carried on doing loads of stuff off my own back for all of the years leading up to diagnosis. I think one of the most important things, which I think we'll get onto later for me after my diagnosis and learning about how my body was going to change, was that I really didn't want to lose any of that or who I was before. And I kind of used it as a way I used sort of who I was to focus myself to help get me through what was happening to my body, to sort of keep sight of that sort of end target and end destination.
And we obviously we purposely started with before, and there's to understand who you were. But obviously, the diagnosis changes everything. It does, and I think it changes a lot of our lives. Our lives evolve into different things, and it does impact our identity. And I just wanted to start maybe with how has it affected you and your identity of who you were on the super yachts to who you are now, I guess?
I think when I was diagnosed with my primary diagnosis, I felt very strongly that I was carrying on with life as normal as I could. I worked right the way through. I put myself in hospital many times with infections because I was told I shouldn't. But I was very sort of determined. I had my own business. I needed to work. I needed to keep busy. And so life did change, obviously, because of treatment. But I was determined I would get back to me. It wasn't really until after my treatment finished that I then felt very lost, because I felt that there was a part of me that wanted to get back to that pre-25, pre-cancer girl. And then I sort of had this realization that I was never going to be her again. So it's then learning to try and find a new identity. It's trying to sort of work out who you are in the world, what you want in life. My goals had changed. I was much more about trying to live, and actually enjoy life, because obviously I'd had this drama happen. But I think even from that point to then how I am now, things changed yet again, because then when I was diagnosed with my secondary diagnosis, there is a massive transition between the way you feel, in a primary diagnosis, when you can at least get some form of life back, to then almost feeling like you don't know. I completely lost myself, I think, at the time of my secondary diagnosis. I lost my ability to have children. I lost my job because I couldn't then do hairdressing anymore. I lost everything that I ever knew, I think, just disappeared in the blink of an eye. And so that was, again, it wasn't trying to find me, it was just trying to find a completely new person. And it's taken a long, long time. And I think I used, at the beginning, I didn't know how my treatment was going to work. So I think I really threw myself into just doing anything and everything I could to enjoy the moment. And I think that's really important, because we do, especially a stage 4 diagnosis, you start living day by day, week by week, and not year by year. And I think it took a long time to come to terms with that. All my friends were getting married, having children, buying houses, planning for the next 10 years. And I'm thinking, well, I'm planning for next week or the next month. And so it's just, it's a massive learning curve, and it was a big struggle.
I always think about that thing about time and how time changes after a diagnosis, how awareness of it and how you calculate it, and it's a massive tangled mess, particularly when it happens when you're a young person. And now, talking about, you had to find a new identity. We've spoken about going from being a dancer to a teacher and finding your way there. And what was the big changes for you when you found out you had cancer?
So initially, I guess, I don't think I realised, you kind of get swept along in the beginning when you get your cancer diagnosis, and I sort of was like a deer in the headlights, because you don't ever think it's going to happen for you, do you? I think there's the obvious things like the loss of fertility. You know, I always wanted to be a mother, and I was too ill. I couldn't even have my eggs harvested. So obviously, it was like letting go of those kind of things. Once I let go of that person that I was before cancer, I actually feel like I probably know myself now better than I've ever known myself before. And it's kind of stripped away things that aren't important, things I used to worry about. So in a way, you lose that person. But for me, I've really found my true self, I guess. I feel like, but it's been a long journey, because you have to grieve along the way. You grieve for a loss of all the things that Laura was saying. You're watching your friends carry on with their lives. And, you know, there's people here who are really young. I was 36 when I got it, and, you know, that's fairly young. But, you know, when you get it as a teenager in your 20s, that's just a time in your life you shouldn't be thinking about all this stuff. And all of a sudden you're worrying about things that, you know, you shouldn't be worried about as a teenager or as a young adult. So yeah, it has been a journey. Obviously, all the physical things for me, obviously having my vagina cut out of my body, my anus, you know, I have my part of my bowel sticking out of my body. So again, going from being a dancer, who my body was my tool, to then looking down and thinking, how did this happen? That's been a massive adjustment. And having this permanent colostomy has been a definite journey for me. I accept it, and I'm grateful for what it's done, but who really wants to poo in a bag? Like, it's not anyone's dream, right? But so, and again, it's finding the gratitude for what has happened to you, because it's allowed you to stay alive. But also for me, keeping it real, like, it's stuff that we never thought we'd be thinking about, you know. I didn't think that I was in a rush to have children, and the big thing for me was, if I knew I'd had kids 1 year before, you know. And it does, you ask yourself quite big questions about your life and your person, like who you are as a person. But I think inevitably for me, I feel probably happier and more complete now with half my organs missing.
And it's really interesting speaking about acceptance. And I'm going to come to it, talk about acceptance in a minute, Jake, if that's all right. But just to welcome Cate to the panel. Hi. We have hear a little bit about your profession, but also I have asked everybody about their mundane superpower. So it's something that you're particularly good at, but you're never going to save anybody's life with, or win an award for. So,
I always rock a strong lip.
Oh, yes.
Never far away from a strong lip. Yeah.
Fabulous. And would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Kate, and I'm a cancer specialist nurse.
Fabulous. Thanks, Cate. Thank you so much for joining us. So, Jake, I want to ask about acceptance, because it's been something that's been brought up here, and accepting life now and what that means to you. Can I ask a little bit about how you feel you've got to that place, and if you feel you've got to that place?
I still think I'm very much in flux at the minute. Like, I'm still like, you know, when you first get diagnosis and there's so much adrenaline running through your body, and you're just trying to react constantly to everything. And I sort of coped with that by trying to be proactive and try to plan as much and control as many things as I could within that immediate situation when everything's moving so fast. But I don't think I've ever lost that sort of ball of like burning energy or adrenaline that's sitting inside of me. Like, I know I'm only like 2.5 years since I was diagnosed, so it's still like really early days, but I still don't feel like I can stop moving. Like I have, I have like sort of, I have big targets and I have smaller targets to get me to those targets. But I think that's the only way that I've been able to sort of get over what happened to my body, is that trying to find as many positives and as many opportunities within that I could. So I think like, and I'll never get over like being stared at by children in the street, and like that constant bit of when like a child's walking down the street and like, mummy, where's that man's leg? It's just like, if I'm in a good mood, like I can be really good with it, but if I'm already like, if I'm in a bad mood, it will like it can send me over the edge some days. And it just, so like some things like that I don't know if I will ever get used to. And it's also like getting used to like taxi drivers prodding in and trying like asking too much information when I really don't want to tell them that. When I know they're just asking to be nosy, they don't really care. Like if I'm happy to talk to someone if they're like genuinely interested and they're having a conversation with me. But when it's just like nosy people wanting to know what's up with me, like it's a bit less bad. But I think in terms of like accepting, like I know that my leg's not growing back, and I know that, I don't know, it's still like, if you told me like this time 3 years ago that I'd be doing some of the things I'm doing now, but also like I'd have half an arse, I would not believe you. And I think that process of accepting it, I think as I found out more information about my treatment and things that had happened in and around some of the mistakes that happened in that initial sort of diagnosis and first surgery, I think if I'd found out all that information at the very beginning, I think I could have spiraled quite badly. But because I've had time to sort of progressively get over these sort of little new bits of information and parts of the story that I didn't know, it's a lot easier for me to accept them now 2 years later, when I kind of know what my normal like every day is like. I know what I can do. Whereas like when they first tell you that we're going to chop you up in that way, and they're telling you never walk again, you'll be in a chair for the rest of your life, you probably won't work again, that's all really scary. But I kind of knew that I never wanted to do that. But now that I know that that's not my normal, then it's a lot easier to be but kind of okay with it.
And these moments of telling story, that story about the taxi driver, like having to share and having to like, how do you get used to that? Laura, you tell your story and like you share it. How do you cope with that? Because telling your story can be difficult. It can be hard. Yeah. How have you found that?
It took, I think, a while to kind of accept what I was going through. So I think, I didn't at the beginning necessarily want to kind of open up too much. But then when I did start opening up, I felt it was almost like my kind of therapy. I felt that actually by me talking about it made everyone around me less worried and scared. And also I was kind of made a big thing with my friends to ask me questions. Because I think, again, when you've got something that you're living with, it's very easy for, if you don't talk about it, your friends feel they maybe can't bring it up. So you become this kind of, I suppose, power of like no one knows quite where they can tread and what they can say. So I was very open with them and said, if you want to know something, talk to me about it. And I think that helped in both ways. And I think then because I opened up on social media, and again, the comments and people just coming in and saying, because you've shared it, it's helped me because it's made me understand maybe going through something else. I mean, the thing is, when you've gone through like a period of time where maybe you've been bald or you've looked really unwell, you get kind of a lot of sympathy from general public and maybe unwanted attention. But then when you look well, you almost feel like, well, hang on a minute, I want that sympathy now because I'm actually going through it still, but I don't look unwell. So it's a really fine line of everyone's so different in how they approach it. I've got a massive scar on my arm, and I've had people in the past. I remember being in this queue, I think, for fish and chips once, and this guy sort of said to me, "Oh, that's a good scar. Where's that from?" And I went, "Cancer." And he just went, You know, I should have said a shark bite or something. But, you know, it's amazing that people just don't know. They don't want to talk about it. They get very scared by the word. And I think as well, being, you know, in the stage 4 community, I felt, you know, we're going back to 2016. So nearly 6 years ago, I was diagnosed with the stage 4. And no one was speaking about it, literally no one, and I felt very alone. And someone who was 28 years old, you know, to feel in a place that you're not accepted. People literally, you mention the word stage 4 or incurable, and everyone shudders and just goes, when are you going to die? Like, kind of, it is that, and, you know, people just don't know how to approach it. So then when I started speaking about it more openly, I was co-founded Secondary Sisters, and again, that was because I really wanted to open up that conversation, educate people, not just cancer people, but the general public into what a stage 4 cancer diagnosis actually is. And also just bring people's stories to life. And I think, you know, by getting the word out there, people are talking about it more now. I've noticed a massive shift, especially because Instagram is such a big thing. Social media is, you know, people's lives now. We talk. I mean, that's how I met Nat. Like, you just meet through social media. And I think it's so much better that people are open, because I hope it makes it less scary for people that are now coming forward into potentially a stage 4 situation, and they then can see that there's people living with it.
We've kind of mentioned some of these invisible impacts as well. Can I ask Nat about some of those sides of things that perhaps aren't so visible? Because you've mentioned quite a lot of the visible things, and but as you said, like, it's a case of going, they're not visible, like...
Yeah, like, obviously, I don't walk around, lucky for everyone, with my vagina and anus, or where they used to be, out. But yeah, so obviously I can hide mine. So obviously, unlike Jake, who's is very visible, I can style it out. But also, that has its own issues as well, because I look probably quite normal, whatever that is. But I have a lot of things that I live with. I have one, so I'm perched on one side. I'm basically sat on bone on this side because they took my right bottom cheek to rebuild the hole underneath of me. And yeah, it's all hidden stuff that affects, for example, my intimacy in my relationship, my, obviously, fertility, my toileting. You know, I have to stick a catheter in to empty my bladder. I have a bag for my poo. You know, all of these things are not visible to anyone. The biggest time that people, I think, treated me like a cancer patient was when I had complete hair loss. But apart from that, I think my surgery is one that you can hide, which is I love because it gives me some normality. But it also, people forget that I can't do everything anymore. And yeah, I think as well, I don't know about you guys, but I think when you have something really quite extreme happen to you, you kind of make more effort to not show the pain you're in and to not show the struggles you go through every day. I'd rather focus on the good things rather than, otherwise I would never get out of bed in the morning if I focused on everything I'd lost. So I do think that that's part of being a cancer patient, is you almost put on an extra brave face, more for the benefit of those around you. But yeah, I definitely think...
That's tiring.
Yeah,
like
it is tiring. Like... It is tiring. But you know what? Like, you asked about sharing stories, and I very much think I appreciate the people who share their stories publicly. I do it myself. There are also times I've been like, oh my gosh, like, everyone knows that I have no anus. Like, 26,000 people follow me, knows I've got no anus. Like, do I actually want them to know that? So there is that fine line of, like, I am sharing some really personal stuff. So I actually totally understand people who do not want to share their story. You don't owe anyone anything. You don't have to tell anyone anything. You do what suits you, and you'll actually find your little circle of friends. It doesn't have to be a big public announcement. You'll find your little crew who really get you, because even people who've had the same surgery as me, it's not exactly the same. They might have had a kid before. You find the people who really get you. So I think don't ever feel pressured to shout it from the rooftops, but also never feel ashamed of what you're going through either.
Yeah. There's that real difference between like confidence and comfort. I find, because I'm in the theatre world quite a lot, we talk about confidence and things, and actually, if you have the comfort to be able to share with one other person over a cup of tea, that is as important as doing it in any other way. And I think comfort is a real thing that we don't talk about enough. Kate, can we bring you in here to talk about some of those kind of invisible impacts that like you've seen in your time of working with people as well?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for asking me. And I lost my best friend last year to ovarian cancer at 42. And I'd been a nurse 23 years when Nikki first got diagnosed. And she was poorly for 3 years. And I learned more. I'd been a cancer specialist nurse for 15 years as well before her diagnosis. I learned more about cancer as her best friend, hands down, than I have as a specialist nurse. Not the knowledge, but just I learned what happens after you close the door and you've seen the oncologist, or after you've been given that news, or the friends that are like, let me know if there's anything. They'll let me know if there's anything you need. Well, I do need that. Oh yeah, but if all of that kind of stuff. And I just think it's not about being one thing. How you feel, you can have a 4 seasons in a day, in an hour, can't you, of emotions? And actually, what you said about if you want to be loud and proud about it, or just very private, that same person can feel both of those things, can't they? So what I say to my patients is just, you're catapulted, no one chooses to have cancer, you're catapulted into this unwanted and unknown world. And I'm always amazed, actually, if you haven't had a previous experience of anatomy and physiology, how much you're just meant to know about your body. And if it's, GCSE or possibly A-level biology, the last time you read about bodies, there's just a sort of expectation that you probably know a lot of stuff about bodies and bits. And so I just always say to my patients, just give yourself a break. Don't pressurize yourself to be anything. Take, the old adage of taking one day at a time, but what Jake said about goal setting, set yourself some flexible goals. My job now is living with and beyond cancer, and I do lots of post-treatment workshops with patients, and we talk about ground rules. So what you said about telling friends what you do and don't want to talk about. One of the things that patients had said to me before, but happened all the time to Nick, was that people stopped sharing their everyday with her. So maybe they'd be going through IVF or a really hard thing at work, and they wouldn't want to impose their issues on to her, and that was really hard for her. And so she was her mum. She has 2 kids, and the school mums would just stop sharing stuff with her, and she'd feel isolated anyway with living with stage 4. But then she'd just feel really out of the gang. Yeah. So I just think setting ground rules is a good one, and you can be that could be as literal as literally emailing people and saying this is what I want to talk about and this is what I don't want to talk about, or it could be more metaphorical and just, to your point about, sorry, my mum would be horrified, I've got my back to you. As like the taxi driver, just say, mate, I don't want to, sometimes you just have to be quite, you have to just be, it amazes me what people do ask. But sometimes, like you say, some days you might be in the mood, and other days you might just say, do one, mightn't you? And, and it could be on the same day. It's also, I've been a head and neck, a breast, and a colorectal cancer nurse specialist, and I think head and neck was very much what you said. You wore your cancer, so you didn't have a choice. You know, you may have had part of your mandible taken away, and your face might be distorted. You might not be able to swallow. It could affect your speech. But interestingly, as a breast and a colorectal specialist nurse, to your point about being able to be more, you could choose, you have more choice. But then actually from what I really learned from Nick was that you just, she lived in a lot of pain and you couldn't see it, but she was just exhausted a lot of the time and between treatments. And so I learned that as healthcare professionals, we want to fill in the gaps. And I've been horrified at some of the things I must have said, meaning well, along the years. Yeah. And I think, you know, no one can there's nothing people can really say. And I think, but you can just be. I think if to tell your friends, just be there and just do something consistently. I really learned that. Just keep doing that thing. So if you send like a care package or you make an extra lasagna or whatever for your freezer, if you're on treatment, just keep doing that. And I tried to do that for her, and I still do it for her family.
And so I think it is really important to hear about those people who have been going through the experiences with everybody as well, and learning from when we are on the other side of that and being the friends, and our kind of the tips that we would give to those people. I heard recently about the dumping out. So you have your circle, your direct circle, the person that you're with, and then the rule is that you have to dump out. I don't know, has anybody heard of this?
Yeah.
Ruining it every time. Right? Somebody else can say it better. But that's it? Great, fabulous. So you have your circle, so the person you're really close to, and then you don't complain to each other, you dump out. And then they have a circle, and then they dump out. We'll link to it. We'll do that, because I'm ruining it entirely. I'm so sorry. But it was a lovely tip that I learned about how to support people living with cancer. So has anybody else got some other tips about to their friends, their family, how they like to keep that relationship with them?
I think it's a case of, is that just being there? And as much as my friends know that I'm going through, the stage 4 diagnosis that unfortunately is incurable, they also have their own issues. And I really love the fact that actually, like my best friend, she has confided in me when she's having a tough time. And she sometimes goes, oh, sorry, I maybe shouldn't be saying that. And I'm like, no, I'd rather you do that. And I think it's keeping that sense of normality, but also just acknowledging every now and then. And it came across where I lost a really close friend last May. And I remember my best friend sitting me down at that point, because obviously I was quite distraught. A few weeks later, we had this really good heart-to-heart, and she opened up and said, I'm really sorry, I haven't asked you how you are properly for so long, because I don't want to think of that inevitable, time that's going to come where she's going to be the one needing that support. And I think it's really important that you kind of allow that to happen. And she was in tears, and I was actually by that point okay. But we needed that little kind of almost like a jig back in okay, this is actually a disease that is quite, well, it's incurable. I'm not going to be here one day. And I think sometimes people forget that, especially the longer you go on looking well, having treatment. People forget. People move on with their lives. And it's about bringing it home, but not letting it empower your day. I think I like to be treated as Laura. I like to be treated as me as well. Just every now, just ticking that little, how are you? And as we were saying, I think I had so much support when I was bald and going through major chemotherapy, and obviously that's lovely. And I had my home look like a florist every week. I had I had to go and buy more vases. I had that many flowers. But then it stops. As soon as you start looking well again, it stops. And I think that's also the time where you're still feeling very sick. You're still feeling very poorly. You still want your friends to just come and sit with you to watch a movie and not have to speak. But they're the times people go, oh, okay, well, she's fine again. And so it's about not forgetting that they're still going through something that is quite hard. And if it's dropping around a lasagna or a box of chocolates every now and then, or just literally saying, how are you, but meaning that and wanting them to be able to talk about it, I think that's just really important.
Yeah,
I recommend to book things in because it's easier to cancel, and especially in post-COVID where we live in such a fluid world of booking stuff up and cancelling. But I think that it's better to have things in the diary, and that could just be normal, like meeting for a coffee or a walk, or like a big thing. Because cancer can be really expensive, can't it? Like, doing stuff all the time. But book things in, and then it's easier to take stuff out. But just almost sort of gently remind people that, it's still there. And then you have an opportunity to share whatever's going on in each of your lives. That's just something that I think is just quite a practical,
Yes. And Jake, I want to bring you in here as well about thinking about how you interact with like your friends and family, particularly with your amputation and how you live your life now. Yeah, how do you manage those relationships?
So I think when I was really ill, it was right at the beginning of COVID. So I kind of used that to my advantage in a way that I never wanted any of my friends and my family to think of me as being sick or being really ill, although like when they saw pictures of me or something in the Zoom, like it's very obvious that I'm ill. But because it was only like me and my girlfriend, her taking me to treatment every week, just the two of us in the flat and our very like close circle of friends here in Glasgow, that it meant that I could control everything going out the way, if that makes sense. So I never really let anyone see me. No one really saw me really sick. So that when I did start reappearing, when things started to open up last year, I was looking a lot more like myself, looking a lot more healthy again. And it also meant that when I wasn't feeling up to it and feeling really weak and feeling really tired, I could just shut off a bit more. I could sort of like hide away and not have to feel too much pressure to sort of try and like seem more up and to seem more awake and more able to like hold a conversation. But then equally, like that had a negative effect for my girlfriend here, for my friends, for especially for my family, my friends like down in London or back in the Northeast, where not so much in the first part of treatment where I was really full of adrenaline before the surgery, but in the sort of second 2/3 where I was really sick, and they were lucky to get me on the phone for more than 10 minutes, but because I was just too weak and too tired, but because they are thinking about me all the time in their heads, but I just can't do it. They think that I'm upset with them or I just don't want to talk to them, when that's not the case. I just couldn't, if that makes sense. So and then so like when I was sort of reappearing back to the world, like we did a lot of fundraisers, and one of them was like a big swim. So we went back to my beach back in Newcastle, and we did a big swim with me and all of my old lifeguard colleagues, and we swam like 5K down the coast. So then loads of people from all corners of my life growing up back home just appeared at this beach. So the narrative switched from me being like, how are you okay, to, oh, that's really good, like, well done, you did that. Like, so it was more positive. And then I think going into like how I am now with everyone is like when I've been I'm still seeing people for the first time with one leg, and it's like, oh, like I was really worried about seeing you, but actually you are just you just have one leg now, and that's totally fine. And I think that whole process has managed to sort of, people just interact with me in the same way. They have to carry my drink for me. They just sort of give me a bit more space to walk around me. And I think I'm really lucky that I've managed to do that. I think the biggest change is just being stared at in the street. But that also has its positives in that, like, if we're at a gig or we're in a crowd, like, I can be seen a lot more, and people do give me that space that I do need because I'm obviously there. So they're all like positives and negatives to that situation.
And Nat, also with the physical impacts, similarly to Jake, of how have you found those continued conversations? Obviously, you would have had initial conversations with friends and families and loved ones, but how do you kind of manage those conversations now?
I think, like Jake, mine happened during the pandemic, my surgery. So, and I had no visitors at all. So I emerged after a month, and well, I went straight back into hospital. So I was in hospital really 6 months, all alone. So no one actually saw me going through the very worst of it. And it was really tricky because all of a sudden you just appear, and I'm still Natalie, but obviously underneath my clothes, I'm different. I'm living with chronic pain now. Can't sit on my bottom for very long. I have my toileting things. And you kind of want to explain to people that just because you can't see it, it doesn't mean that I'm not struggling with it. But then half of you is like, I don't want to have to keep reminding people. Like, it's a really tricky balance. Also, you do just want to get on with it. I don't need to be like every day, or I'm in pain today. Like, no one's gonna want to hang out with me. So yeah, it is really difficult to find the balance. I think for me, I think the best advice I could give is probably let the person, if I'm ready to talk about something, or if I want to talk about something, or if I want to say my pain's horrendous today, like, there's nothing you can say to someone that will fix it. So we should never try. Just all you want is a connection with someone that you know that you've been heard and that you've been seen, and that they acknowledge, I don't know what to say about it, but I acknowledged your pain. And that, for me, is the most helpful thing. I don't need someone to fix me. I don't need someone to offer suggestions or compare what I've been through to having a baby or something completely unrelated. Like, that's just not helpful. The best thing is just to be seen, I think, to feel seen.
Have you had to shut down people when they've, I've known so many experiences where people have gone down routes and you're like, I've got to find a tactic just to shut you up. But have you had to shut down people? And
I try and do it in a nice way, because obviously they are trying to be in their own way helpful. But, there are a couple of times where it's like, I can imagine what it's like having your vagina cut out because I've had a child. But it's like, obviously it's just insensitive as well, because my surgery means that I'll never have a child. So they need to understand that what they're saying can be actually really triggering. And I know people mean well, but it's just, for me, comparison is not it. Even amongst cancers, it's just, we're all so different. Even people who have the same surgery, our cancers are different, our recoveries are different. I had someone the other day saying, I was out of my pelvic extenteration in 2 weeks. And I was like, well, good for you. I was still in 6 months later, but here we both are, alive. And it's not a competition. We shouldn't compare. And I think that's one of the biggest things I've learned, because I think back to times where I've made stupid comparisons and I've said, at least. Yeah. And it's like, now I'm on the other side of it. I'm like, okay, now I'm self-reflecting, and I'm like, that isn't helpful. Yeah. It's learning. No one means to be awful, do they? Everyone's trying to be helpful. It's just a learning curve.
I think find your own silver linings. Please don't find them for other people. And it's interesting, isn't it, that I grew up in a very religious household where it was you prayed for your fingers and toes, and I realized, like, I practice gratitude, but gratitude comes for it to be authentic. It has to come from within, and it's actually quite misguided to be grateful on other people's behalf, and hard to navigate that, to hear it, even when some people, and it is well-meaning, but then you just have to rearrange your fate. Like, I found that when Nikki was dying and then died, to be people meant well, but say, at least she had, or at least that, and I'm like, she was 42 and it's shit. So please,
just say it as it is. Like,
and it's I personally shudder at some of the things I know I didn't say that ever, but I'm sure I have said things because I think by the nature of being medical, you want to fix things, you want to make things better for people, but I probably say much less to people, and I don't know if you discussed the social media thing before I came, but I think what I say to patients at diagnosis, that just, you can tap in and out of it, and you might have I know for Nick, she found it quite hard sometimes with people, you know, on their better days, she might be having a bad day, but she followed you, and she found a lot of comfort in when you were in Homerton Hospital and you wanted a lolly, I think, and she found it
Fanta twist.
hilarious. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, my name.
Hashtag Fanta twist. And it actually,
Good times.
it really helped her sister because it was funny. And I think that stuff like that, like, you know, so you can tap in and out of things. And I think that's really important. It's comforting to find strength from other people, but that, like you said, everyone's different, and you can be that same person in a day, in an hour. So yeah,
That's so true. I've often thought, oh my God, Chris, my partner, just must be like, I don't know what I'm going to get from 1 hour to the next. Because you can, while you're on treatment, you can wake up like, yeah, this is it today, I'm feeling really good. But then like 2 hours later, something might trigger you. You might, I don't know, like it's so up and down all the time. And I have found something really helpful is just to not take anything personally. Like when you do hear things, like that's easy to say sometimes.
That's really hard, isn't it?
It is really hard to do. Now I'm further out, I'm better at it. But when I was in the midst of my pain, and especially when you're young and you're watching all your friends crack on and doing normal things, it's really hard to like not take things personally or not feel like offended by the things people say and whatnot. But yeah, and being on social media, and even if you've got 1 follower or 1 million follower, you are open then to unsolicited advice. Like I didn't actually ask for your advice, but thanks so much for giving it to me. And like it is a mindful. So I think what you said is really important. Like there's been times where I've just taken myself off. Like after my first lot of chemo radiation, there was probably about 3 months I didn't even log into Instagram. I needed that headspace to process what had happened. Because it's all 100 miles an hour, isn't it?
Yeah, and also because people will feel they know you and they don't. And that is, but I think what you, because now I feel a bit of a stalker because I follow you. And what you said the other day, about just please don't give me your examples. I thought that was brilliant, and you know I did make some notes, and that was one of the things that you did. That you set your boundary in such a polite but just firm but a clear way, and you explained why it's not helpful and why it's also just not accurate. Sorry, I've still got my.
But it's also
that was brilliant. I thought. Yeah,
and this is very easy, I think, with the diagnosis is to compare someone. You know, you find someone who's got the same diagnosis as you, and it's very easy to be like, oh, why is her treatment working, or her one's not working? And it is very, you know, over the years I've done that. I've kind of looked at people and I've gone, oh, so her treatment worked for this amount of time, then she went on that drug. And I'm like, but my body isn't her body. I respond, and as Nat was saying, like, some people will respond to surgery really easily. I was really fortunate that with my shoulder I responded quite well, but I'm never going to get full use of my arm, where some people don't get half of what I've got. But it still doesn't make mine any easier. It just means everyone's journey is different, and it's about not comparing. I think social media is amazing and I absolutely adore it, but it is dangerous because it's very easy to be like, well, I'm like her or I'm like him, and why is it not working for me, and why is it doing this? And so it's about you are you. And what happens to that person is not necessarily then what's going to happen to you, and that can be good or bad. And I think it's very easy, especially, you know, recently I've found it quite hard, social media, because there's been quite a lot of people that we've lost, people that I follow, people that I've really admired and looked up to. But you have to remember that that's not your journey and that's not your way of life. And so,
that's so powerful. I really resonate with that, and I also think that you can fall in a rabbit hole with forums and social media, can't you? And you can,
we were discussing just before we came on about how obviously you do hear stories about people who are sharing, that they're obviously sharing, and we're hearing those stories, and they're the ones we're hearing. And sometimes we've got to also think about the ones who aren't sharing, and there's a lot of those stories aren't the ones that get suddenly put up to the top, and they're also not the ones that you see. I mean, I remember being on a forum only a couple of years ago and seeing that somebody had relapsed with Hodgkin's, and I was like, oh, suddenly had that feeling again,
Yeah.
because it was like, oh my word. But then I was thinking, oh, there's probably a lot of people at that day and that same time who aren't posting because they haven't relapsed, and trying to just not think about that is the one way that narrative might go as well.
I think sharing that as well, I'm always really aware that, you know, having an operation like mine, like 40% of people who get referred for that surgery don't want it. They don't want to live like that afterwards. So, and I'm always really aware that, you know, so now I'm at a stage where there's basically lesions in my liver, which are probably metastatic cancer. So my cancer's back in my liver. So I'm always really aware that there's people going through my surgery now who are thinking, right, I'm going to get half my organs removed from my body. So there's a good chance that I'm going to have some longevity after this. And then they're seeing me, who's just relapsed. And so it's really, I find it, but then on the flip side, I've got a million people, because I do share, I've got lots of people saying, how are your scans? So it's like, it is a minefield, but I'm always really conscious that there are new people coming into the cancer world who will be frightened by the things that they're seeing, and they will be worried that will happen to them. So yeah, it's just really sensitive, all of it.
But equally, that person could Google something and see it on
Don't
Wikipedia, totally unsolicited. And, you know, I think that you are not responsible, and I know you're not saying you are, but you post authentically and from your heart, and that's what people will see. And I see that personally and professionally when I read your posts, and they've given me a lot of comfort, and also just, you know, on both sides of the coin, but also it's just really I think when people do share at that level, it's really informative. It explains, you're just explaining what's happening. So I think people have an opportunity to tap, like as the viewer, you have an opportunity to tap in or out, don't you?
Yeah.
Oh, I want to talk about the triggers. We mentioned the trigger word came up, right? And triggers pop up anywhere. Bryony told me the other day that the new Thor film's got triggers. Oh, I don't know that at all. Is that right?
Yeah, I heard.
I haven't even seen it yet. But triggers pop up all the time. I just wanted to hear. I'm going to go to you first, Jake, because otherwise, I just want to. I want to hear from everybody about kind of what do they do to look after themselves when they have these triggers. They do happen. They're moments that pop up. What do people do? Jake, over to you first, if you don't mind.
No worries. So I think like in the last couple of weeks, like I had like one independent report come back that when I was reading it, it was like 25 pages completely like disassociating from me as a person, but as to like drilling down into the exact facts of what happened to me, and then going into like the science behind it, which I wasn't expecting it to land in my inbox. And then when I was reading it, I was being bombarded with statistics and things that I'd always avoided, and it just knocked me completely like out of sync for a couple of days. And I just have to sort of go quite quiet for a bit, and I just need to really sort of digest. So when that happened, I didn't even tell my girlfriend that it came in. I was just quite quiet. I was just quite anxious, but I had to sort of switch off and take time myself to digest all of that information and start to sort of go back to sort of positive mindset training that I taught myself to do like from the very beginning, where I actually just sort of step back. Like, I know statistics don't mean a lot. I know that some of the things in that report are very different to what actually happened. Like they would only get from reading notes, but in actuality, those things that it's saying aren't actually that bad because of the very specific things I was told at the time. And then also, like at the minute, one of my really close friends who was always there for me, like here in Glasgow, like all the way through everything, like he had colitis, and then he was very quickly taken ill on holiday, and very quickly had a stoma put in last week. And when I'm talking to him, it's a sort of, because they're very, very different situations, but sort of he's living in the hospital at the minute. He's on a lot of pain medication, and just sort of the way I'm trying to, when I speak to him, is trying to remember the things that I kind of wanted to be told at that time, but also trying not to preach, and also trying not to sort of like try not to call him out of the blue and give him a lot of warning, because I know how weak he's feeling. I know how much pressure I felt at those times to take phone calls off people and to talk to people, but also like when I'm trying to give him advice on how to sort of mentally get through the fog of the pain medication and the mood swings that come with that, and the negative spells that it brings into that, sort of in trying to help him is sort of like putting me right back in that moment and in those situations, and that's quite rough. But I think it's just always the way, like, I still try and do things is like, okay, like this has happened, but I always still try and project further and think about the longer term goals, and find whatever positives I can in whatever's knocked me like out of sync, if that makes sense.
And that when, like, not even just triggers, but shitty moments. When shitty moments happen, and they do happen, right? What do you do? What like, do you have things that you do regularly to look after yourself?
Yeah, so I do like a gratitude list when I'm feeling really rotten, but it has to be things that you're genuinely grateful for, like you have to mean it. But that kind of switches my mindset quite easily. Also, I made this happy playlist, so it's like all my favorite songs. It might be like really nice memories or whatever, and that's a really like tangible thing to take you out of a funk, basically. Like when I'm in a bad place, I literally listen to...
Oh, you went there. I think that we were just about to play your song. That was why. I think they've all gone it.
They've all gone.
We'll have to project. It's fine.
We're not going to do a cappella.
But I will. I wanted to ask, just as part of that, what songs are on there? Like, have you?
So, I mean, you guys are probably too young. So, Raspberry Beret is like my favorite song ever by Prince.
You watched Strictly, that was on there, wasn't it?
Just loads. Like, there's been like, I went to a Chase and Status gig, and there was a really nice moment where the glitter cannons went off, and you know those moments, it sort of takes me back to that. And I remember listening to this playlist in hospital when I was in there for like months and months and months, and like really tangible things that just helped me. I could just shut off everything else. So the playlist for me was a really good one. Also, triggers for me is a sign of what still needs to be healed within me. Oh, hi.
There you are. Love it.
Triggers for me is like, it's a really good way of recognizing what I haven't healed properly yet, what needs a bit more work. I used to get so triggered when I saw people getting their stomas reversed. I used to get so upset, like horrible. I was happy for them, but I was so sad for myself. And like, I don't feel like that now, but it's time sometimes. And yeah, it's just, I think it's an awareness of what still hurts within you, and it's that's okay. You don't have to get over everything. It's hard stuff that we're all going through. So yeah.
Laura, what about you? When things are low, what do you do to support yourself?
It is difficult because I think it really varies on the type of low. I think there's many triggers I have throughout my life. It's been very triggering for things like even just losing my job, and like I really wish I could have done that. So it's like when people sort of say to me, "What do you do now?" I'm like, well, I don't kind of do anything specific. I sort of now just jump around, do sort of little bits and pieces. But it's again not having that identity. I think that's something I find. You know, I used to be Laura the hairdresser. Now I'm Laura the cancer patient, and I sort of, you know, I don't want to be that. I want to be someone else, and it's. I always find that really, really hard when people kind of introduce me as, "Hi, this is Laura. She has stage 4 cancer," because you don't just want to be defined by that. Yeah. But it's also things like, you know, when I've always been one of these people that is, again, similar to Nat, wanting a family, wanting to be a mum. So I find it extremely triggering, obviously, when friends announce or family announce that they're pregnant. And I find that really hard because I'm the sort of person prior to this would have been, you know, if someone told me they were pregnant, I'd have been literally jumping around the room, crying, probably like, you know, the most happy person in the world. And now I am always like, great. Because you get that internal, like, just, I can't really describe it, but that feeling of just, you want to just curl up and kind of run away and go, but you know, you can't. And I think the people who are closest to you know that, and so they're more sympathetic in the way they maybe announce these things that they know they're going to trigger you. But then if it's medical side, if it's, I'm waiting for a scan result, for example, I go completely the other way. I just want to do everything and anything. I literally cannot keep still, because for me, sitting still is when I think about cancer. And I found COVID, and I'm sure a lot of you kind of throughout COVID found it very triggering on the basis that, I was always busy prior to COVID. Then suddenly a slap bang, home all the time. The only time I went out was to go to hospital for cancer treatment. The only time I sort of got, anything exciting in my life was to do with cancer. And so I found that really hard, because I went from this person that literally could kind of go through life with it, but like it's kind of there, it's not right in the forefront of my mind, to suddenly it being there, always at the forefront. And so that was really, really hard mentally, because I don't think I was ever sort of really an anxious person, someone that suffered with any form of mental health issues around my cancer. And it suddenly brought on this like anxiety and this kind of worry, because I had this, literally my life was then revolving around my cancer diagnosis again. So now we're back out of kind of COVID times. I'm back to being uber busy, and I literally just had scan results the other week. And the 2 weeks running up to it, I don't think I had, other than sleeping, I wasn't really at home. Like, I was out every day doing different things. And a lot of people kind of are like, oh, you're doing so much, but that's my way of coping. Yeah. I like to be busy. And then literally it hit me kind of, I got my scan results, and then I was knocked down for a few days, because I was just so my body just went, no, stop, just stop doing. And so I think some people curl up and wanted to stay at home when they get results, or when they have this sort of something like a scan to kind of come around to.
Yeah.
There's no right or wrong way of doing it. That's just my way. And people can say, you're doing too much, and I'm just going, well, that's me. That's me. I know, I like to be busy.
Over it, yeah. But that feeling of the scanxiety feel, which is a regular thing for living beyond the diagnosis, right? And it is something that I think is recognised of how tiring it can be, and how much your life has to change for those events and things as well. And I found the pandemic was the first, suddenly put back into a label after I'm 12 years post-treatment, and suddenly I was given a label again of you're an endangered person. We need to, and you're like, oh,
vulnerable.
Okay. I'm vulnerable now. Oh, given that. So, and when you're working with patients around that feeling of living with the anxieties and scanxiety in particular, is there anything, Kate, that you're kind of offering, anything that you're talking to them about from your perspective as well?
Yeah, I try quite hard to put it back onto the person and say, what do you think is going to be helpful for you? Because like you say, everyone is different, and now, with stratified follow-up for a lot of patients, some things are, you may not be coming in as regularly. So I think it's, just know what works for you, I suppose, and try things. Try the equivalent of Panelist, or maybe on the run-up, if if you're going to be waiting for results, are you best if you're kept busy? So would it help to have things in the diary, or do you just want to crawl under a rock until you know what I think what you said, Laura, about you get to know what works for you, don't you? And so I always say to people, just don't put too much pressure on yourself. I always used to, it was a treat thing, where regardless of whatever happened when I went into that room, I would come out and I'd go to the snobby coffee shop, as I mentioned. I'm okay with it, I'm fine with it. I'd go to the snobby coffee shop across the road regardless of what happened, because it was a case of going, actually, the news, your body has already done the thing. It's a case of going, you're just, and so you have to go and have that snobby coffee anyway. So that's
I always have a scan day Costa. I mean, it's not snobby, but I think it's like you say, having your own toolbox of things. It will be different. It will be different for everyone, and it might be different for you as time goes on. I
also realised I did learn from my own experience last year that I think I have been quite prescriptive with patients in a very well-meaning way, to say, you can do this, 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 and this, and all bright and breezy, and then actually that it's not like that, is it? So this might work, or I'm much less prescriptive and
Oh yeah, like my oncologist, she finds it hilarious because I'll walk in and she's like, "How are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, I'm really tired," and she's like, "Yeah, but you haven't stopped, have you?" And I'm like, "No."
Yeah.
And so they learn their patients, don't they? And I think that's as well. Your medical team should know how you are, and I think that's somewhere. Yeah.
I think it's important to say as well, like, it's okay to be sad.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay to have days where you do cry all day. And I find those days the best healing wise. I'll have a day where I have a really good cry. It kind of flushes it all out, and then I feel strong and ready to crack on again. I think by trying to resist that emotion, it prolongs it. So the more I'm trying to push down the sadness, and I'm okay to say that what has happened to me has left me with things that I live with that is sad. But I mainly crack on because when I have these times where I need a good cry, I just allow it. And you're allowed to. You're allowed to feel angry. You are entitled to feel whatever you want. I think on the outside, when you're looking on Instagram, everyone, there's all this positivity and dancing around and whatever, and that is fabulous. But that's not the whole reality of it. And you should never feel pressured to go and dance around a chemo pile or make reels or whatever. That's nothing against people who do that. It's just that there's also a very dark and painful side to what you're going through. And
it's accepting the loss. You're losing, as you mentioned earlier, the grief. You lose your identity. You lose potentially things like fertility, parts of your body. Like, I know for me, I found it quite hard because a lot of people would go, "Oh, you got a free boob job." And it's like, no, I actually got a part of my body amputated. I had to live a year without that breast. It was really hard. And I think people just go, "Yeah, but they look great." And it's like, but they don't have any feeling. I lost my nipples. I've got scars from here to here on both sides. Like, it's not something I chose to do. And I wrote a post about it today because it's actually 8 years ago, I actually lost my left breast. I then had to, live a year without it. And it's about acknowledging that you go through a huge process of grief for losing that part of your body, like with Jake and his leg. Like, it's obviously such a visible part of the body that people will maybe mention it. But when it's a non-visible part, i.e. breasts or bowel or something else, like, no one's going to ask, "Nat, can I see your scars?"
Well, you say that. I have had a few inbox asking for pictures of my bottom.
Great.
Oh,
wow.
But
I know.
But it's also learning that...
Which I didn't send back, by the way.
OnlyFans?
Oh, my Lord. No one needs to see that.
Sorry, we're going. But it's such
it's intrusive as well. It's like, why do people think that's okay?
Yeah. But when you're going through it, it's okay to actually have to grieve these processes. You're not just losing... one part of you. There's so many little bits in a cancer diagnosis, and that can be from even a primary diagnosis. It's about learning, as I said earlier, like, I felt very lost in that time after my primary because I had to find me again, and I almost feel more me after my secondary because I almost had to do a complete 360, and I went, well, that's Laura over there, and now this is Laura here. And I like my Laura now. I like Laura who I am. I like Laura what I do. I'm a yes girl. But it is okay to actually go, that was fucking shit. And it's just an awful situation.
And can I say as well, as someone who's, let's say 12 years post-treatment, and I think that it is really worth acknowledging that it is living, it's still living beyond this diagnosis and this. I guess it's that sense of the grieving process. It does change, and there are moments when it's like it is easier and things, but there are moments as well where it just pops up, and the fertility thing is a big thing when you're in your 30s, particularly, and suddenly it comes back around. And they do creep up on you, and it is about acknowledging. I really like that thing of not holding on to it, and I really want to highlight that. It's a lovely.
And I think as well, amongst all the loss and the grief and whatever, there is still a really great life to live. I never expected my life to be like this after they told me what they needed to take from me and what could potentially happen to me. This is way beyond the quality of life that I thought I was going to have. For the main part, I just am Natalie. I've been here, there, and everywhere recently, and life is good. All life is like this, whether you've had cancer or not. There are sadnesses, there are joys. There's just such a rainbow. That's what life is. It's, and I think cancer is just at really extreme ends of that scale, but I'm just embracing it all, and there are days I feel sad, but I move through it a bit quicker now. Like you say, time changes things, and even with this latest bit of news with potentially these liver mets, I feel like I'm quite relaxed about it. I'm feeling well, and I've got a good toolkit behind me now and a good support.
You learn to change the way you deal with life, don't you? You prioritize different things, and I know for me, like when I first was diagnosed with my secondaries in hospital while I was trying to recover from my shoulder operation, I wrote myself a living list. And anyone can have a living list, and I think it's so important to actually think, you change your life. Pre-cancer, like I don't think I was working, I was busy, like I'd never really stopped to think what I really wanted to do in my life. When you get hit by the train of cancer, you kind of suddenly wake up and go, okay, well, if I am going to only be here for a year or 5 years or 10 years, what do I want in those years? Maybe I can't do the fertility thing, maybe I can't do the buying the house thing or the dancing career or whatever your previous plans were. Your path is different. But like Nat said, it doesn't have to be worse. It can be better. And I'm probably the same. I look at my life now and I'm like, wow, I'm doing all these incredible things. I'm talking on panels, I'm doing photo shoots, I'm part of amazing charities and volunteering from different things and putting my love and my kind of focus into things that actually is doing good for people, rather than maybe focusing on things that weren't important back then. And so actually, I can, hand on heart, say, if I could have potentially prolonged my life a little bit more, I'd be really happy with the life I had now. And, cancer has given me amazing friendships, amazing community, amazing support. And so it's about finding those. I always say this, especially in a stage 4 diagnosis, it's without that, you kind of have a light at the end of a tunnel, right? So you go through life and you always say that phrase, there's light at the end of the tunnel. Well, for a cancer stage 4 patient, there isn't light at the end of the tunnel because unfortunately there is no end to that tunnel, or if it is, it's probably a drop off. But there's cracks in the tunnel. And so light creeps through. So even when you're going through a dark period of time, you know that one day that light is gonna, there is light and it will come. And whether that's every day or every hour or every week, there's always going to be moments of light. And I think that's so important to hold on to. So however bad, however hard, however nasty cancer is, there's light, and you can definitely find that.
Thank you. I'm aware that my watch actually broke. So I have
no idea what time it is.
That we do want to open it up to ask some questions. So just you can take this moment to know I'm going to come to you in a moment. I'm going to ask Jake a question, and then I'm going to come to you. You've got a question, you're warming up for a question, you're going to have this question. Jake, just realised I wanted to bring you back in here. Sorry.
Sorry, no, it's quite difficult over
yeah,
here.
I just wanted to talk about these things of, I know like about saying goodbye to like the previous life and things, and I know you've spoken to me before about how you let go of your leg particularly, and I just wondered if you wouldn't mind sharing that and then how it's kind of propelled you forward in that way.
Yeah, so I like the sort of psychological support that I got from the NHS was abysmal at that point, and that when I'd asked my medical team for that psychological support to help prepare for the amputation, I was just basically handed leaflets from someone who was preparing me basically for the loss of a loved one rather than preparing me for the loss of a limb, which, to be fair to her, she didn't have that experience, but so I had to figure out my own things, my own way to do things. So the 3 months where I was getting treatment before then, I was probably the most productive I ever remember being, even though I was attached to the pump. So I started writing a lot of poems, putting wee books together, and then it all sort of culminated in a leg funeral, which because of COVID was over Zoom. So I had maybe 200-300 people from all random corners of my life on this weird Zoom call. That was a mixture of me reading stuff. I'd edited loads of music videos, so you had Hips Don't Lie by Shakira, but it was interspersed with videos of me jumping around doing nonsense. And I don't know if any of you guys will know the My Chemical Romance music video for Helena, where it's like some sort of mad emo funeral going on. We're all dancing around in the rain. So it's like putting all this nonsense together. And then I had like my friends and some members of my family like doing stupid poems and reading these things at the funeral. So then after the funeral, when I was going to go into surgery, I knew that I was going to be like, after being under, like I was asleep for about 2 days, and when I came through, I wouldn't be right. So I put this book together, which was meant to be like sort of like the little booklet you get at a funeral, but it was all of the things I'd written. It was all of the poems, all of the like music playlists, all the things my friends had done, and in it as well were like big lists of all of the positive things and all of the things that I was going to do after surgery that I would never have been able to do beforehand. So like even now, like when I'm a bit on days when I'm tired and days I can't be asked, I think of that version of me, and that version of me that went through all of that treatment and was really sick, and I actually know, like, I need to do what I need to do right now. I need to do this because that version of me couldn't, and that version of me went through that so that I could do this now. And again, it's just constant goal setting and constant nonsense. And I think as well, like the way that I cope with everything that's happened is through sport, and just rediscovering that part of my personality that I lost from when I was younger, and just actually like that is what drives me through, like keeps me going, and is what keeps me like, when I do feel down, I can go and kill myself for 2 hours on the bike. I can go for a swim. I can just sort of use that time to be quiet and to process and to push myself and to feel like I'm being productive. So yeah, like and also like, so like the bigger targets I have now of like trying to go to the Paralympics and seeing what I can do there is always thinking like, I want to do not just like my friends and family proud, but I want to do me proud. I want to do that me that was sick and couldn't get out of bed and couldn't move. I need to do that guy proud because that was for this. Mm-hmm. And that's what so it's that constant pressure to feel productive all the time. But yeah, it's just quite.
Thank you, Jake. Yeah, I know. I heard that story and I was like, oh, wow, it's such a great story. The second time I've heard it. Thanks, Jake. I'm going to open it up. If there are any questions from anybody in the audience, anything you'd like to ask any of the members of the panel at all? Yes, over there, Jemima, I'm going to send you over.
The microphone.
On her way over. Thank you.
So, it's on. Why is it on?
The mic's coming. It's all right. We're nearly there. It might be on now.
Okay.
Hi.
So I find it really hard to tell my friends and stuff that I'm stage 4, that I'm incurable. I don't know if that's because I got diagnosed. Sorry, I don't want to picture him. I don't know if that's because I got diagnosed during the pandemic, or if, I don't know. I just don't really know how to tell people. I think a lot of my friends will be like, oh, but it's fine. Like, you'll look back and you'll be like, oh, when you've got kids and, when you're better. And I'm a bit like, people find it too much.
Yeah, I think
I don't know.
It's hard. It is really hard. But I feel that probably once you have maybe said it and got that kind of honesty out, but made it a kind of, I don't want this to become a thing, but this is the situation, just so that they're aware. I think it will take that maybe anxiety and pressure off yourself. It will kind of lift it. It's almost like, I always feel it's like if you keep it in a box, it's kind of always going to sort of be there, and you're the one taking that pressure. But as soon as you open that box and kind of almost, it takes that pressure off you and allows that, because I'm sure from my experience, like, they want to be there, they want to help. And I presume they know about cancer in your life. They just don't know about the stage 4. And it is worrying, but I think it's about having that honest and open conversation, saying, just because I'm stage 4 doesn't mean I'm going to, and I don't like saying the word die, but that's what they sometimes get scared about. But it's about maybe showing them pages of people that are living with it, talking about that. And because, there is life with a stage 4 diagnosis. And it's about taking that level of it being scary to actually just kind of, let's just chat about this as normal people.
Yeah.
So,
maybe show people pages.
Also, you're protecting them, and actually, you do what's right for you, because
you don't need to tell everyone everything.
No.
You can have like different flavors of what you choose to.
Yeah.
But if you do want to talk to people, don't you be worried about their feelings, because that's really nice of you to be worried about it, but actually you're the one that needs the support and understanding. And I think if it's something that you feel you want to do, then they'll accept that, and they'll hopefully listen. And you could even say that. I don't need you to fix anything or say anything, I just need to tell you this.
Yeah. Thank you.
I hope if you do that, it's a good outcome.
I think what I've learned as well is that this is more from from what happened last year, is that some people might not be able to cope with it, and you have to, but it might be that that those people won't know what to do, and they may be absent, and so that is also something that I didn't anticipate, actually, that the people's.
I think a lot of people my age don't really seem to know what stage 4 is.
Yeah, this treatable, treatable,
like I'm living
but incurable.
With it, I'm
and what does that mean?
I'm doing the things I want to do.
And I think this is also even within the community. That I think it's confusing, and also what used to be palliative, like we would say palliative. That narrative has changed, and we talk about stages, but people will ask about stages and then won't even understand what that means either. So I think that's really, really important.
The page I co-run Secondary Sisters is probably a good place to maybe send them, because we've got a lot of information on there and a lot of stories of hope. And I think that's the thing. And as you say, you might find that some friends disappear. And some, but
and I'm sorry to say that, but that is something that actually is that, and that is their own, like
that's their own issue.
For me, that I say this as a friend who lost my best friend. One friend in particular, her children were Nikki's ages, and she just couldn't cope with it, and she just stopped asking about her. She stopped and it's changed. It changes the dynamics, and whether or not you talked, do you remember about grace? Do you give people grace if it's difficult for them, or do you? You won't know until you try it.
And sometimes it's the people you expect that will be there for you who surprise you, but then there are other people who really step up and surprise you too. So
that is so true.
Can I ask a really difficult question though? Is what would you say to someone if it wasn't you who had the cancer, you were looking after your friend? So I think there needs to be grace, because you most probably wouldn't know what to say to you. So I think
not at all.
It's about not trying to, as you say, fix it. It's about not trying to say the right. Just say, and also it's that not being offended if they say the wrong thing. Just saying you can't say the wrong thing. Just be there for me, and that's
I think that's really important, to be able to say I wouldn't know what to say to me either, and I know you're scared, and so am I. I think that's really important.
And you can't rationalise these things. Like, don't try to find the rationale behind this. There's no need to make sense of it, I think. I don't know if that makes sense.
I tend to say, like, I'm on long-term treatment, I'm living with this, and I feel like maybe it's just lack of awareness, isn't it? So maybe I just need to sort of direct them to some pages. And
And take them, obviously because of COVID it's been a bit impossible, but take them to treatment with you. That's the other thing.
I think it's just people are so out of the loop from it now, because I was diagnosed way back, it's 2 years ago now, and
Yeah.
People have just seen me reappear, and like.
But
they're
also, you
like,
don't
she's
want them saying things like, "Oh, well, when are you going to be off treatment and better?"
Yeah.
Or because that's also quite triggering, as we were talking earlier. It's hard. Or when are you thinking of having children? And it's like, well, I maybe can't because I'm now on long treatment. But they might not understand that, and actually, it might stop those kind of interrogation questions that you don't need, and actually, like you say, give you the support that you do need, possibly in a different way. But yeah,
It also doesn't help that I think the cultural references are binary, aren't they? Like I always said that to patients when I was like I had neck CNS, where if you say you have chemo, patients expect to lose their hair, and you're like, well, that's a different kind of chemo, but you only have in films. It's like hair loss chemo, isn't it?
cancer's complex. There's so many varieties.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
referring people to the Tumour Site charity pages, Marsden have excellent pages for living with and beyond cancer. My hospital trust, I just rewrote the living with and beyond cancer pages. I mean, obviously Trekstock amazing for their resources, and I think, let them, like you say, let them do the homework. It's not for you to make sense of it on their behalf, but also open the conversation.
I'm only just aware of time. My role with a broken watch is to look after the time. We did have another question just there, and I wanted to make sure we had time for that.
Thanks.
That's okay.
So basically, I just wanted to ask, I forgot your name, sorry.
Natalie?
Brown dress, Natalie. You mentioned something about if you're going to feel sad every once in a while and just let it all out. However, I do believe that once you learn to accept yourself and accept everything in your future and know that things can go up and down, you shouldn't have to do that. And that's advice, not me telling you off.
Well, so you think that you shouldn't have moments where you need to cry?
Yeah, exactly. I don't quite understand that point.
Can I jump in on that, if that's all right?
No, of course.
If it's all right, can I jump in on that just to say that is I think that's a perfect example of different experiences and different ways of taking these on, of going that, like, some people totally would feel that way of going, this is the way I feel, like I respond to it, and then there are different ways that others. And that is, just to come as well back to that importance of hearing these different narratives, of going, actually, why we need to do this. Because some people do just go, actually, I'm now just going to not feel that way. And some people are like, actually, I do just want to release it. Yeah. And it's so important to hear all these different ways.
In every before cancer. Some people are emotional, some people are not. I mean, I was someone that cries at everything, cries at a movie and stuff. So I think if you are an emotional person anyway, then allow that to be part of your healing or part of your journey. But
I accept what happened to me. I acknowledge it. I'm grateful to be here, but I'm a human being. I'm not a robot. So I will have times where I feel joy, I feel sad.
We also haven't spoken about fear, or I don't know.
Times I feel frightened.
I don't know if we spoke about fear before I got here, but I think that is something we don't, as healthcare professionals, speak enough about. We just don't. We don't talk about intimacy enough, and we don't talk about fear enough, and we don't allow people to feel the feels. And I think fear is, just permission to feel. And what works for like one person doesn't work for another. It's just not prescriptive. I think it's platforms like this are really important just to share examples. But I can say that I've learned much more on the other side of it than on the professional side, because it's just different, isn't it, for everybody?
Are there any other questions? Yeah.
Kate, ages ago you said to me to take someone's denial is to take someone's hope, which I thought was a really important point, that you don't need to point out where someone is.
Yeah, I think hope is really important. But what I really learned from Nikki was that actually we were all hopeful around her when there were moments where she just wanted to be scared and she was tired and she was keeping everyone else up. So I think that hope is really important, but just be where you are. And if you are around someone who is in that situation, it's really tempting to try and fix it, but just let them be.
Oh, yes. You can indeed. Yes, you do.
You need the microphone.
Thank you. I was just going to say, whoa. Do you feel like you're a better CNS now?
Yeah, I hope so.
I was going to say, in relation to that, what do you think is needed for you were a CNS for 15 years and now you feel like you're a better CNS. So what do you think we need to do to make all CNSs as good as you?
Gosh. Are you a CNS as well? Are you
No, I'm a cancer patient.
Right. I just think what Nat just said about being a person, we're all people, we're all individuals, and I've learned a lot as well from Deborah James's journey and Rachel, she died on the day that Nikki had her hysterectomy. It's 4 years. It will be 4 years on September the 5th, and I think we are getting better. I think what I learned from Nick's situation was that the emphasis was always about the cancer, and so she had the cancer removed, but no one talked to her about menopause, medically or surgically induced menopause. So I'm on a personal crusade. It was me that I ended up being her CNS a lot of the time, because she'd talk about symptoms and I'd be like, yeah, that's menopause. I mean, no one's talked to you about it. She was 41, no one talked to her about intimacy. It was me as her best friend, and that would just be like, babes, no one's said about this or that, or, it's just, so I think we just need to take the taboos away, we need to talk about
Everything.
everything. And I think H&As, I don't know if people do the holistic needs assessment with you, but H&As are a really good opportunity to put it on the person, on the patient. Okay.
There's a point. Put up your hand if you've had a holistic needs assessment. Okay, so questions asked by a nurse at different points along your journey, that's a holistic needs assessment.
I think people are so quick to fix the
H&A?
cancer, they forget that the person behind the cancer actually is going through menopause, fertility issues, pain management. I get people talking about palliative, and as soon as I mention the word, you get kind of everyone's so scared of it. I've been under palliative since day dot because I have pain. I need pain management. But we don't talk, people don't say to you, they literally go, you're going to go and see a palliative team, and you go, ugh. They don't go, but this is to sort out your symptom control. And if it was explained more, because I think, as I say, they're so quick to cut the cancer out, give you the chemo, they don't look at, you've got this life after that.
Yeah.
But what is that life when you've got all these symptoms and problems? But I've gone, even down to things like intimacy, I've gone to sex therapists to sort of get help on that front, and they've gone, I don't really know what to do with you. You've got, we can't give you anything, so I don't know. You're 34 years old. I'm not sure. I don't know what the answer is. I'm used to dealing with older women, and it's like there isn't this understanding and this education in the medical world to look after the external needs. It's get rid of the cancer, treat the cancer, sort the cancer. So I think it's amazing when you've got personal experiences that can kind of help that, and you will be a better nurse because of it, and hopefully that will trickle down. Your experience can teach others. But I think when you've got that personal level, it makes you a such better person to go
Ideally, you wouldn't have to go through what you've gone through.
Yeah.
No, you.
But I will give Jemima we used to have a paper copy of the H&A, and I could send it to you, and it just gives you an overview of sort of top to toe psychological and physical assessments and practical questions. I think that from when I started, there was a massive gap between the psychological side of things and the physical, and I do think, I know the difference from what I was working in before and what I was working in now. But I think just to improve the quality of life for patients and just to be able to sort of talk, to talk candidly, like when I was a colorectal CNS, just talking to men younger, older than me about erectile dysfunction, but just to be able to have those proper conversations and not make any assumptions, but just to keep the conversation open and just be very clear with your patients that there is no question you cannot ask, and if I, as your nurse, don't know it, I will do my damnedest to find someone that can. So yeah, just keep the conversation going and not. I guess I've learnt the biggest probably thing I've learned from my experience last year is just not. I think we can, as a collective of healthcare professionals, by the nature of what we do, we can be quite prescriptive. And like you have both said, it's just you what might work for you on one day might not. You might not even have your own prescription.
Yeah, true.
So yeah,
we're coming to the end. I know we could talk all night. We could talk all night, and that is the reason why Trekstock have got a place at the bar, so we can talk all night if you would like. But before we do that, we will do a wrap up, which is to one takeaway that you hope that the audience, those who are watching on the live stream, would take take away from this evening's conversation. We're going to go down the line, and maybe I'll start with Jake first. We'll go
the other opposite way.
Yeah, just to mix up a bit. Just,
Bye for a while.
Yeah, just your takeaway that you'd like us to do from this lifting the lid, please, Jake.
Probably just to not be too hard on yourself, and to not, like, I'm really bad for not following my own advice, but not to feel pressure just to do things because you feel you have to, and to feel okay to be slow. Like, you're allowed to chill out, you're allowed to just feel the way you're feeling, and you don't have to stress out because you're not feeling happy and you're not feeling strong, you're not feeling positive. It's okay to feel those feelings and to just not be hard on yourself, because whatever you're going through is what you're going through, and only you know how that feels, and that's okay.
Thank you, Jake. Kate, can I go to you next?
Yeah, I was going to say, just feel how you're feeling. Allow your permission to feel. That would be my one.
I would say that cancer takes a lot from you, but it doesn't take like the essence of you. It can't take that. So it can take a lot of things, but you can still live a really beautiful life and just learn a new way. But yeah, it can't take who you are as a being.
And yeah, I would probably just go back to that sort of almost light in the tunnel sort of scenario. Like you go through life, and however bad times will seem, there's always going to be brightness coming. So just hold on to that and remember that, take each day as it comes. As we say, no pressure. Just do you and find those little glimmers of light throughout your journey.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for coming on the panel and for being part of this evening. It is worth saying that, like, you obviously be able to find everybody on social media. You'll be able to follow their stories in that way. You can also get the Trekstock supported podcast Afterthoughts, which will have Nat's story and Jake's story and maybe Laura's story in the future, we hope as well. But for Series 5, they're on that series as well. It's really worth noting we've had lots of conversations this evening, and lots of things you might feel straight away now. You might go home and feel odd later on, but it's really, I think everybody's highlighted that importance of noting your own feelings and just finding a way to either talk to a friend, somebody over a cup of tea, reaching out to all of the brilliant support we have. But it's really important to note when we've had conversations like this that those feelings can come up. So it's just to say thank you so much. Thank you so much to all of you. I think we're all going to give a clap to our panelists and to everybody as well. Thank you so much.
And to Toby as well.
Thanks.
Thank you for hosting, Tobes. Thank you to you all. As Kate raised in her talking about menopause and talking about quality of life. At Trekstock, that's what we're really, really passionate about. Surviving cancer, but what it costs to your well-being, your mental well-being, and your physical well-being. So we have loads of things that we are doing to support that, to help you post-treatment and living with long-term treatment. So we've got a Renew program, which gets people active with and beyond cancer, which is open to everyone, small groups online, and it's coming in person. We have exercise, lifting the lid on the 21st of September here, talking about our program and the impact it's had on different people during treatment and post. We also have our menopause program coming up, which is a 6-week online program that's looking at how you can support yourself to navigate menopause in the way that is right for you, looking at everything from medical treatment, non-medical options, lifestyle, nutrition, but most importantly, connecting you guys to other people who understand what that's like. We also have Meet and Paddle on the 20th of August, which we still have some spots for, which is in London. We've got free travel bursaries as well. And we also have our post-treatment coaching program coming soon as well. So there's lots of things that can help. We talked about intimacy. We've got a Lifting the Lid on sex that's on our YouTube as well. And any topics that you guys think we should be talking about, please let me know. Drop an email to health@trekstock.com. But also help your clinical nurse specialists do better by telling them, and bringing up the topics that matter to you is what we're about as well. Yeah. But if you don't speak about them, then sometimes clinical nurse specialists are a bit scared to bring them up themselves. So help them do that and help them to support other young people better. Thank you very much.
You should wear that all on a t-shirt, Jemima. That was very good.
Right. Thank you.
Do you want to? What pub is everybody going to, Jemima? Little